you that 1 teaspoon of honey could change the entire trajectory of someone's life? I'm Sarah, and this is Creatives Processing, where creatives reveal their process and process what it means to create. In this episode, I'm sharing my conversation with Lee Hedgmon, Portland's self-described honey alchemist and founder of the Barreled Bee. Lee's story defies every traditional business playbook you've ever read. She went from procrastinating on her feminist studies dissertation by homebrewing beer to becoming one of the most innovative artisan food creators I've ever encountered. But what makes Lee's story so compelling isn't just her success, it's her process. While most entrepreneurs start with market research and focus groups, Lee starts with a simple question. I wonder what would happen if. That curiosity-driven approach has led her to create products I've never tasted anything like. Honey aged in whiskey barrels, honey sticks that taste like cocktails, and condiments that make you rethink how you prepare meals. What you're about to hear is more than just an entrepreneurship story. This is a course in authentic creativity, in how academic rigor can enhance hands-on experimentation, and in why the most innovative products come from genuine passion rather than calculated market positioning. Lee doesn't just make products, she challenges assumptions. She'll tell you about hiding test products in laundromats, why she cancels production on bad mood days, and how being a Black woman in a white male-dominated industry taught her lessons that transformed how she approaches business. She's raw, she's brilliant, and she's completely unapologetic about doing things her way. If you've ever felt like you don't fit the traditional entrepreneur mold, if you've wondered whether your weird creative process could actually be your competitive advantage, this episode is for you. Let's dive in. Here's my conversation with Lee Hedgmon.
Some people call me the honey alchemist. I love that. And I run a company where I do barrel aged honey. I work with apiaries, wineries, and distilleries, and I pair different honey varietals with different types of barrels. Some of that product is specially done and just stands on its own, but most make it into different food products.
They're so tasty. Like this morning, I put the honey lemon drop buzz sticks on a
And
slice
tea.
of,
Oh my
I
God.
put it on.
I do like it in tea.
I do it in tea, but this morning I had like a slice of Ezekiel bread with some chunky peanut butter, and then I drizzled
Mm,
the honey lemon drop honey on top of it. And it just like elevates anything you make.
it really does.
It really does. Like barbecue sauce is delicious tossed in chicken or anything. And I've been using the spicy hot ketchup this week on my scrambled eggs. And it's just like,
Oh yeah.
it's just so much better than, it's like you can get ketchup from, Trader Joe's. And I love that ketchup. But like, it's just, I don't know, knowing that it's like coming from you and, there's a story behind it just makes it just, I don't know, just really
Well,
elevates
it
the meal.
tastes really good.
And it tastes really good, and there's no high fructose corn syrup in it. So I'm like, hell yeah, it's all good for you stuff.
Absolutely. So everything that you can pronounce.
Yeah, yeah. So how did you get started? Tell me your journey from where you started to like where you are now. Yeah.
Oh, that journey, that twisting and turning journey. So I have a background in I used to be a distiller, and before that I was a brewer. Um, and before that I was a home brewer. So I did all that at home. That's pretty much where it started. The funny thing is that that journey started when I was in college and I went to school. I was in college late, so I was like one of those adult learners, those people who um, they started really late, mostly because I was stubborn and I wanted to pay for it myself. So I was always working. And I ended up in grad school and I took up home brewing seriously while I was in grad school at the University of Minnesota. And I did it because I was procrastinating, because I hated to do the writing of like I was writing my dissertation, I was teaching, I was doing research, and then I was actually making beer and wine. And it got to the point where my committee was like, "We love that you like to bring us gifts. Can you bring us a chapter instead of a six pack of your newly made beer?" um, so if I had to give, that's like the origin story of like, oh, I decided that when I moved back home to Portland, because that's where I'm originally from, um, I was, I was teaching at Portland State, and I really enjoyed. I enjoyed my area of teaching. I enjoyed my research. I mostly hung out at breweries. I got to know a lot of beer people. I got to know a lot of wine people. Um, and I started volunteering. The volunteering, that's how you get a job in a brewery. You volunteer first,
Sure.
to like cleaning kegs. And that's how I got hired. Like everything I could, I decided after a year of teaching and working on my dissertation that I didn't want to do that anymore. And I was going to quit and become a brewer. That was my run off to the circus moment. I would become a brewer. When I was brewing, um, which in no way, when I tell people, I was like, they're like, well, you left teaching and you left this research. I said, I never left this research. I apply everything I ever did, everything I ever taught, everything I ever learned, everything I ever researched actually is applicable to what I do. Um, and it was especially early on in my career when I was a brewer, I would make a beer. Um, and there weren't a lot of women in the industry um, at the time. So they were like, I knew most of them. And the idea was that you would go in, nobody recognized you as a brewer. And there were even fewer. If you think that there was a number of women in general, the number of Black women was like even less. I got mistaken for one other Black woman who was a brewer on this coast. She and I would get mistaken for each other. We look nothing alike. We know each other. We actually know each other, and we would laugh because it just got to the point where we would just say thank you and just keep it pushing because it was like I'm not dealing with this anymore.
Yeah.
Um, but so it was like I use everything I ever learned on the day to day because I'm dealing with constantly with people who are like, oh, they don't know who the brewer is. I can hear them talking. I love telling the story. So I'm sitting. Um, I worked for a brewery, which I love, and to this day, I still am very good friends with the folks that work there. Um, and I often would come up and I'd have a beer, or I'd sit at the bar or something at the end of my shift, and the bartenders just knew not to acknowledge me, not to tell anybody I was the brewer, um, without getting my permission first, you know.
Sure.
So they never pointed me out, and I like that because it allowed me to hear people's honest reactions to things. And so this guy's in there, he's tasting a beer that I made, and he's like raving. He's like, "Oh, this is really good." And the bartender's like, "Oh, he's totally into this." So he kind of looks at me. It's like, "Oh, okay." He goes, "Oh, do you want to meet the brewer?" And they're like, "Yeah, I would love to." And they're like, "There she is." And he points to me, and this guy turns, looks at me, and then the first things out of his mouth are like, "It was good, but I would have." And I was like, there are a couple of things. There are a couple of ways you can address that. You can sit and listen to them, or you can do what I do, which is cut them off and go, "Oh, really? Because a few seconds ago, before you knew it was me that made the beer, you were raving about it. So what changed?" I legit, the bartender's face was priceless. I live for those moments. I live for those moments for stopping people from, I was like, "You're all the way up to your ankle, sir. Should I stop you before you get to your shin?" Like that's like
And how did that person react?
he caught what he had done, and I said, and it was like there was that moment of like, I just heard you. I just heard you. I heard you say you loved it, and there's this, and you had no complaints about it when you didn't know. So you know, we can talk about it if this is legit, or you just want to give me pointers because I was like, "Do you just want to give me pointers?" And he just kind of stopped, and I was like, so I bought him a beer, and we continued to talk about beer. We continued to talk about like, brewing, and it went better after that, but I was like, I can't let these go. I can't let these moments go. And I realized that there were a lot of things that I got away with, um, that I know that a lot of my fellow female white brewers could not get away with.
Sure.
And I knew that early on. Some of them were a lot younger. I was clearly older. Um, I was clearly like gonna say what I was gonna say, and you could take it or you could leave it, but or you could, if I'm wrong, which I was never wrong. I don't pick a fight I can't win. Are you kidding? Um,
That was incredibly
um,
gracious of you, though. Like, I mean, recognizing, like, I see what you're doing here, but I'm still gonna buy you a beer and we can have a conversation about it. That's incredibly gracious. Um,
it happens so often, and it happens so often with students that it's an it's the reaction, it's their knee jerk instant reaction of their unconscious biases, you know, from getting to right out their mouth, and I get it. Um, the thing about it is that there's a way to kind of I always say there's always a way to get to talk to people. I think some people who are willing over a beer to have that kind of conversation redirected and not acknowledged any further. But then as you're
mm,
talking and they're getting to know you and they're talking to you and they're talking about something that you're obviously passionate about because you're being paid to do it and you love it, and they love the results and they have this interest, that commonality creates a really good place for people to talk.
yeah. I mean, like, knowing that, I mean, I think it must be, I think of, like, the emotional labor, the unpaid emotional labor that you were researching, and, being a teacher for a time within grad school and turning those moments into teaching moments. I think of the unpaid emotional labor that you do constantly.
I do it. I'm also married, so it's kind of a given. I'm like, let's be real. Like,
But, like, what was it about, you're studying grad school, you had one path you were going to go down. Clearly, it was a distraction for you to be able to, "I'm gonna put off writing, I'm gonna do this instead." Like, what drew you to brewing to begin with?
I will say that if science classes had been more interesting, I would have gone into food science, and in particularly brewing and distillation science. I would have done that if I had known that that existed, because I really realized that I love experimenting. I love trying to manipulate things to get, in particular, to get flavors I want, to get a mouthfeel that I'm looking for. So I love the art and the magic of manipulation, and it becomes art and magic, and the science of it becomes really important because I don't have that background. So I make up a lot of things that are probably wrong. I steal from a lot of different disciplines, which is a part of my interdisciplinary research background, where I look to something else to see what they do and try to apply it to what I'm doing. So there's a lot of things I learned how to do, which was just pure trial and error because, oh, they do that in the wine industry. I'm going to try that. Why shouldn't that work? Um, they do this in like food and for like culinary. So why shouldn't that work here? So that's what drew me. That's what's keeping me doing all of these things is I wonder, I'll find something and then I'll take that little rabbit hole of information and then I'll apply it to different places to see where it's going to be the most interesting. It's fascinating to me that mistakes have given me more than following rules have ever done. I know the rules, and this is what I tell a lot of people. I used to tell my students this: you can break any rule once you know why you broke it. So you have to know that rule in order to break it in ways that make sense or don't make sense and be able to explain it later. And so I learned all these rules and then I would break them. And then there were a lot of places that had no rules for particular styles and I was making stuff up. I didn't cook things unless it was to eat food that we needed. And I still to this day only cook to eat. I
Yeah.
don't cook because I enjoy it. I actually don't enjoy cooking,
Yeah.
which is even stranger when you realize that I make really good sauces and things. I said, but I make them so that I don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about how to season things.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, that's why you can use it with so many different things, is because I love something that I'm like, "Oh, this is barbecue sauce. Oh, Bloody Mary mix. Oh, I am out of, like, tomato paste, but I want spaghetti and we don't have any marinara. Oh, we'll just do this." And so, that's kind of the experimentation of how many different ways can I make different foods using one thing. But I've been really, really blessed, and I say that very intentionally blessed, that I have worked with amazing people since I started brewing, since I started distilling, um, and since I started my business. I work with amazing people who at least get my quirkiness
Yeah.
and they get my weird process and they understand that you know I will often say things for sheer shock value just to see if I what the reaction is going to be, because then that guides the rest of like how I'm going to do something with the conversation. Like they're
It's a
like,
litmus test. How weird can I get with you? How
yeah,
much of my
literally
true
just
self can I show you?
yeah. Oh man, wait till you hear about how we do our how I did my makeshift shelf studies. Let me just say that there's a laundromat that doesn't like me. Freeland, when we first started coming out with cans, we were doing these things, and I started was like I would hide cans in places that where the temperatures were different in the distillery, and I forget. You're like, oh, you're like, why is there a can behind the water? Like there's like there would be random things because everything was dated. I dated when we canned it. It was like, oh, you know,
Yeah.
why is like why does the cold liquor tank have like a 4 pack sitting like on top of it? It was like, oh, because that's the highest place that's flat. And, like you needed a ladder to get up there, and
Yeah.
then I would completely forget ADHD. I was like a squirrel, I'd be putting stuff and I'd find things months later. Actually, I got a text from a friend who still worked there at the time, and she was like, "Dude, I just found a 4 pack of like of canned cocktail." She goes, "Did you?" I said, "I probably forgot. Where was it?" And she was like, "You forget." But I would do that to get the humidity changes, temperature changes. We would put stuff in the freezers. We would put stuff in our I would put stuff in my hot car,
Yeah.
like the glove compartment. I think the worst thing I ever did was take stuff to the laundromat, wrap it up in clothes, and put it in a dryer.
Sure.
And don't do that with glass, but you're fine with with a tin can or something like that. Just wrap it up in case that bad boy goes.
Is this unique to you doing testing in this way, or is this like
I don't
standard?
know. I think this was things that I just thought of was the worst case, like because me, I mean, I did this to simulate like being in a really cold. Somebody accidentally put something in the freezer. How would that change the taste? Road trips. If you're on a pallet, you're driving cross country. It's in the middle of summer, and it gets to its destination. And then what happens? Like, how does that change the flavor? Can we? And then if I can figure those things out, if there's a giant drift in flavor, it's like planning for the worst case scenario. Like, how do you tweak the recipe just a little bit so it doesn't change it, but it accounts for the drift, even if it's only accounts for the drift so that you can explain it to people that that's
Sure.
what it's supposed to do or that's what it's going to do. So a lot of that was for the educational purposes for everybody, for like the staff. Like, if you get someone who says this and this and this is what happens in general, this is and it's perfectly fine. Or it's going to bring out these notes of like, how are you going to spin it? Like that was for the front of houses. Like this is what's going to happen. You spin it, and that was like why we do it. But also for shelf studies, for shelves, I would do things, and I would have product that is like been sitting for, because that's a 2 year shelf life. How is it going to change? I, when you're doing taste test studies of like, oh, I thought this was spicy. It was spicy for the week that I made it. And then a month later, we taste and we're like, there's no spice character. And so we're like, well,
Huh.
let's go back to this recipe. And like what did we do? Like it's just been sitting, like it's getting sunlight, so it's getting hit with UV rays. Like if it's under fluorescence, what's going to happen? So setting things out and about and then dating them and coming back. I tell people to do that all the time. Um, and it's just so that you have it. It's like having a library catalog that you come back and do a sensory for. And that gives you an idea on a really low budget over time of what things are going to taste like, as opposed to paying thousands of dollars to have somebody run it through all these kinds of tests. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're make people expect some drift in naturally made products, um, getting something that tastes exactly like the previous batch is really hard, but I do my best because I have parameters. So everything gets tasted, everything has the lot numbers. I always, you know, if something is completely out of whack, I know to go back and look at the lot, and then I make the adjustments for the next batch. Some things have been like some barbecue sauces have been super spicy, like really spicier than I expected. And then others have been like they've kind of fallen off, but they're still good because their sweetness is not overly sweet anyway, so it still stays in balance. And same thing with the honey. So all of those things, having meticulous note taking. I've done things where on the day where it was like it was cloudy outside. Like I would used to do that all the time because humidity affects for me, humidity would affect distillation process. It would affect how our chillers were running, whether or not we had to run them faster or slower. So the same thing goes in your mood. I don't do production if I am in a mood, bad mood. You never, and if you ask anybody, anybody's old grandmother or whoever, or auntie, and any like old family recipes, they will tell you never to cook in a bad mood because I get that'll that taints your food. It makes that mood goes into your food. So I don't do production. I have
Yeah.
canceled production on a day when I have not felt great in my mind, and I go, yeah, we're not doing that today, because
Yeah.
that really does hold true. I firmly believe that the energy that you carry into a kitchen and carry into your production, um, yeah, it feeds off of that. And if you've
Absolutely.
asked anybody, like when they say this was made with love, they legit mean that. Like when if you can taste it. And so um, I have canceled. I've just not done a production on a day when I know I've not been in my best.
Yeah, because I think, like, if you power through it, like, you're gonna taste it and you're wasting materials, time, money,
Yeah,
all of that. So it might be, okay,
yeah.
today was a momentary loss, but we'll pick it up the next time. But I think, like,
And I
being in
did that
tune with
once,
yourself.
and I have not. I did it once, and I wasn't happy with it, and I said never again, and I'll never do it again. I would rather wait a week.
Sure.
I would rather wait a week than kind of be less than step great. And I've been lucky enough never to be under such a time crunch that something had to get done. Um, where I was in a bad, like I've had time crunches like that, but there's a time crunch and like it needs to get done, but I wasn't in a terrible mood. I wasn't upset. I wasn't depressed. I wasn't all that things. And like going into the kitchen. So it was time crunch, but I was still in a good space.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah. So there's that. So yeah, I do a lot of that stuff. Um, of telling people shortcuts for um, doing that are like based off of like what the end result is for a particular kind of study that would cost you this much money. How do you, what's a hack basically? It's a hack.
Yeah.
Um, and I've been doing that honestly since my home brewing days, when I found hacks and really cool ways to kind of, because I had a budget. And so I always believe in doing it's science. For me, it was like, always like science on a budget.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, okay. You're like, how do
Yeah.
you cook this fast? I'm like, you got a pressure cooker at home. Let me show you how to maximize this effect in a pressure cooker. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's making it accessible, and I feel, that's kind of that's like such a through line with like the products that you make and your process of developing them. It's,
Yes.
there are things that are important and that I will devote a lot of like time and resources and towards, but there are other things that I can find a hack. I can find a quicker way to do this so that I can put more love and attention towards something else. So
Yeah.
it's not just picking up honey from the shelf. It's, you're sourcing, you're going to the apiaries and you're tasting the honey as it's being developed. And like that's a part of the process of developing, future products. But it's also, what are ways that I can maximize my time so that I'm not just like every single thing is done as DIY as it has to be,
Oh
as
yeah.
painstaking.
And it doesn't even have to be that, like, I always was like, it doesn't have to be that bad. We just have to kind of, pick and choose what's gonna work for us. Like, I have my
Yeah.
honey sticks made in Salem, so I drive down there. But while I'm down there, I stop in apiaries, I stop at a distilleries, I chat with people. So I'm trying to make the most of all that time that I've spent in my car, driving a bucket, of product down to be made into sticks. And then I come back down like a week later and pick it up.
Let's talk about this weird process. In your words,
Okay.
your weird process.
It's always starts with the question, I wonder what would happen if. And then
Mm.
I go, I wonder what would happen if I did, you know, I dip this into this. I wonder what would happen if I had honey sticks that tasted like booze. I wonder what would happen. That was the question. So when I tell, and it's a part of the origin, it's the story I actually will tell people is like when I first came up with the idea of doing my business, doing barrel aged honey, I was in the kitchen of a good friend of mine at the time, who had brought back honey from Hawaii. And she didn't say anything. She just goes, "Oh, have taste this honey." She poured me just a teaspoon of honey. And I was like, "Is that all you're going to give me?" She goes, "Yeah, that's it." And I was like, "Okay." So I put it in my mouth and I'm sitting there and I'm tasting this and I'm just like, "Oh, this tastes just like," I said, "Well, this is buckwheat honey, which is so distinctive. It's one of my favorite honeys. So I knew it right away. And I was like, "Oh, this tastes like," and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, "This tastes like rum." I was like, "This is like, oh." And she goes, "How did you know that?" She goes, "How did you know?" I was like, "Well, buckwheat honey is my favorite honey. It's really distinctive." And I like rattled off because, I again, mead maker, 20, by this time I'd been a mead maker for 20 years. And so I was like, "Oh, yeah, yeah." Um, I was like, "Oh," and I said, and then it dawned in my head as I'm standing in this kitchen tasting this. I said, "I wonder what would happen if I put different kinds of honey in barrels that were different." And I go, and that moment I was like, "I'll see you later." I went home, um, thought of the name, went online to LegalZoom and set up and did everything then. I set everything up then. It was April 3rd, 2017. The day
Wow.
before, it was the very next day I did it. And then I go, now that I have all this, where am I gonna get a barrel?
Yeah. Okay, great. I have the barrel B. Now I
I
need the
have the
barrels.
idea and the
Now I need the
concept.
bees.
Yeah. And I was like, I had the tagline, I had everything, and I had no product. And I was like, all right, this is what we're gonna do. I was like, when do we think we can launch this? How long? It's like no idea about how difficult that would be. But I also have noticed that since then, that's always been the guiding question of, I wonder what would happen if. Every one of my products has started out with, I wonder what would happen. The barbecue sauce and ketchup should have come out in 2019. It actually should have come out in 2020. I had been working on it in 2019.
Hmm.
Oh, what happened in 2020?
I don't
Yes.
I don't know. Remind me what happened
Yeah,
in 2020.
that's a year that's been forgotten.
Oh.
Yeah. So as far as my creative, where that start point is, that's always a question I start with. Um, and I'm usually thinking I already have something in mind, and I'm trying to figure out what could I do that's different than what's already out there.
Hmm.
And so, for example, I wanted a barbecue sauce. Ketchup wasn't even on the horizon. Um, and the more research I did, we realized that I could have somebody make a barbecue sauce with like these ideas, and then they have somebody else make it, and they put ketchup in there. And then when I looked at the labeling situation, like when you add something, so for folks out there who are looking at labels, when you add an ingredient that is already a made ingredient to something else, you have to put those lists of ingredients on there on your label. So you begin to look at how long a label is for ketchup, and you go, oh, I don't have enough bottle space to put the ingredient, that is like, how big would that label have to be on my
How
end for
how
ingredients?
small does that font size need to
Oh, I
be to
know.
include
I can
everything?
barely read it now with my glasses on. And so we were like, before I could do the barbecue sauce, I had to come up with a ketchup recipe. And so I went like every other person, I went looking at all these ketchups. And the first thing you do is like you look at the labels. You look at the ingredients labels. And as a brewer, this is a fun thing. I used to work at a homebrew shop, and we used to do people who come in and they make the beers there, like they brew your own beer and they come back 3 weeks later and they bottle it, and it was so much fun. But a big thing people like to do is they like to make clones of popular beers that are out there. And so my job, which I loved doing, was trying to estimate a good clone recipe. And you learn how to read how like breweries will put their list of ingredients. They do the exact same way. When they list their ingredients, they list them in the same kind of order as which we do our labels. Like the largest amount of something is the first thing. So I got really good at kind of figuring out how to create clones of existing beers. And I just took that way of thinking and applied that when I looked at labels. And I looked at a lot of people's labels. I looked at a lot of ingredients. I tasted, um, and I was like, who do I want to be like, but different? And
Mm.
so, um, and then I sat down and was started making ketchup.
Did you work with an incubator at all during this, like, research phase, or was it all you?
It was all me. I realized early on that I don't work well with other people in this stage. I really only like to listen to the voices in my own head.
Sure.
And I am really good because I taste for a living. I'm really good at describing textures and tastes that I'm finding um, and filling in gaps. So a lot of it is a learned skill of I taste. I'm a beer judge. I judge spirits. I've done a lot of tasting. Sometimes we taste things blind constantly. So we're finding things that are not there, or we're making adjustments and tasting things like, what am I tasting? So what's another thing that'll give off what's something else that gives off roses or taste of roses or soap that is not lavender? Oh, it's this. So that process of elimination, when you go through and you're tasting an abundance of things in the world and you learn how to make the identifiers, their their high notes become identifiers for you. So that's
Yeah.
how I did a lot of my tasting. So I was like, this is great. I'm getting high notes here. I think it would do well with some earthy notes here, but I don't want, what kind of earth? Do we want traditional umami? Do we want sour tang? Do we want fish note? Like those are the kind of questions that I begin to ask as I'm tasting something. And I taste with different things, and I taste the same things at different points. Like for weeks, I would taste the same things at different times of day and just note it. Because my taste buds change, so I had to be able to make sure that I was consistently tasting the same things all the time.
Yeah.
Um,
And in your
mm,
research phase, are you it's like you set out to do a barbecue sauce. Were you t you taste for a living, were you tasting all these popular barbecue sauces that were already on shelves and trying to find a niche that you would fit into?
no, because every barbecue sauce that's on the shelf is too sweet. And I
Ha!
knew I didn't want sweet. made it to the point where in order to taste everything else, they're so out of balance,
Gonna
that
taste the
oh,
barbecue sauce right now, even though
oh
I had some earlier today, but I'm just gonna do a little.
oh good, I'll taste some with you.
This is gonna turn into like the SNL sweaty balls a little bit. So yeah, barbecue sauces on the market are too sweet. Is it just, do you find, because you're creating something, clearly you're
Oh,
passionate about it, but you're creating something that you feel is missing on the market, that like you creating a product that you want to see on the market. Are you also thinking
yes.
about your audience at that point too? Like, is there an audience looking for this?
I think that um I I want to say yes, but I often am super selfish, and I think about what I want to eat and what I like, um first and foremost. And then I go, as I'm moving and using it with different things, I go, oh, this is going to work perfect for somebody who doesn't want to do this, or who wants this to take place of this. Um, so my big thing was, I wanted I wanted less sweet. So people find that it's like, not as the sweetness isn't the first overwhelming thing that you get. Um, and the other thing was that for folks, I have friends who also do like a lot of grilling, and they love a lot of smoking. And one of the things we all noticed, because I would smoke meat and I do grilled ribs, is that everything was patchy. And I was like, oh, well, I know why everything is patchy. Well, because different caramelization points, different sugars, they burn at different
Ooh, yeah.
temperatures. So when you're using sauces that have a lot of different sugars, you sometimes can get patchy meat, that like you'll get crystallization and burning in different places. And I was like, I knew that if I was only using one thing, because I only wanted honey's the only thing I ever use as a sweetener. um I knew I was going to like, that was going to be a selling point for even caramelization for things. And a friend of mine actually likes to use it for his chicken, because of that. When he does competitive stuff, he was like, I'll use this for the chicken. And I was like, when he told me, I was like, that's so cool, thank you. um
Yeah.
because he's like, it's nice, it's even, it's good flavor. It never goes, so that level of heat that you're tasting in the barbecue sauce never gets above that. Like when you hit it, that's where it stays. It doesn't matter how much you're eating, it never gets higher. It doesn't layer itself and become more and more and more.
Yeah.
um
Tell me more
it's
about
me.
developing the flavor profile of this barbecue sauce
So
as
I
I
looked
sit
at
here
all
and
the
just
different,
continue to
yeah,
eat it.
I looked at a lot of I looked at a lot of different barbecue sauces. Like, oh, what's Kansas City style supposed to be? What's this style? St. Louis, Texan, like all these things. And when I noticed that there were a lot of flavors, there was a lot of spices that were dominant in all of these. And so I was like, all right, so this is what everybody uses. And I go, um, what don't people use? What are things that appear maybe in one recipe but not in another? It's on the list, but it's not as frequent as like garlic, onion, that kind of stuff. Paprika is a big one. Um, I'm not a fan of paprika, so I don't use it for anything. Uh, and I was like, oh, okay. So I found all these stuff that everybody puts in, and then I was like, all right, what are things that people don't that I like? And one of the things I love doing is learning was that you often want something that does double duty depending on what it's mixed with. So I like to maximize what an ingredient will give. And so if a ingredient gives off um, citrus, citrusy tanginess, but also brininess, depending on where you're putting it, that's a perfect ingredient, because that one is going to give you brightness from citrus, but it give you that underlying saltiness, which means you don't necessarily like, oh, so if you have an ingredient that can do two or three things, that's kind of like, that's what I like to, how I like, that's how I would build my beer recipes. We don't have a lot of money, or we do have a lot of money, but we're not spending it on, you know, editing was always a big thing for home brewers. Like when you're transitioning from being a home brewer to a professional brewer, you learn how to edit very quickly. because grain and hops are expensive. So you pick things that will do more than one thing in your beer because you don't
Sure.
have that many. So it's so I take that idea of, all right, who can do double, triple duty depending on where they're adding it. Um, and then then I was just test then I would make things. I would just make it. And I would like to say that if I want to tell say, oh, it took me months. It did not take me months. Half of this run through that we're doing, I did in my head. So I
Wow.
ran through everything, and I'd say it took me maybe 3 months to
Wow.
do have my recipes. I tested my bricks. I tested my pH. I took the class that I needed to know about low acidified foods, so I knew where everything numbers wise needed to be. And at that point, if it was all but finished, all I needed was somebody else, other people to taste it. And that's when I went to the Food Innovation Center for OSU's Oregon State University's Food Innovation Center in Portland.
Yep.
That's when I went there, met Sarah Masoni, who I love, um, and Mike Adams, who is a great food scientist. And I just said, can you taste these and can you test these? I just needed their confirmation testing that the testing stuff that I already had at home, being a brewer, was going that my numbers were going to be in line with their numbers. And they tasted it and it was like, what do you think? Is it missing anything? Where are we at for this? And I was asking all the right questions because I'm asking all the analytical tasting kinds of questions that you would ask when you're like doing an evaluation. And it was like, it was great. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. We made it. We tested it. My numbers were all great. I got my letters. I went through process authority. We did both the ketchup and the barbecue sauce and it was easy. Um, that saved, I will tell you, for me and for anybody else who's ever had to do that, that saved me $10,000. Coming in with my stuff already in check
I
saved
was
me
I was thinking about
$10,000.
that because I wonder, like, you're approaching creating products from like such a place of curiosity and openness and wanting to, it's in your head, you want to do this yourself, you're testing. And I think of other folks may come to that center and just be like, I have an idea for a product. And that's it. It's like I got the idea and I'm relying on somebody else to develop this for me. Maybe they've approached it from the angle of, similar to you, what already exists, where could I fill a spot that doesn't already exist? Maybe they're, doing that market research first and then determining this could be a good product, but without any of the curiosity of what could it taste like, just more from like a more of like a business perspective, I guess, more like a marketing perspective. It's like I want to fill a hole for something, but I have no idea how
Yeah,
to do that.
yeah. It helps that I came from a beverage, a craft beverage where a lot of the same kind of like, I knew how to read certain things, I knew how to make things, and I knew how to apply the things that I knew to what I was trying to do. Um, I'm also an overthinker, and so I would have done all the researching stuff. Like, who do I talk to? What do I need to know about this? And because my background as an educator means I'm going to do a lot of research. Um, Time is valuable, and
Yeah.
people's time is valuable. And one thing I did learn was that, um, especially when I had students would come in for like um, office hours, was you got to come in with a plan, and it can't be a vague idea because I'm going to sit there and ask you questions. And if you didn't do enough thinking about it, you weren't ready for this meeting that we're having.
Oh
You're
yeah.
not ready. So it feels for me, it's like I I couldn't imagine going someplace with just a vague idea and then kind of like, "Oh, you're going to you ask me questions and I'll think about I want to think about every single question that somebody might ask me and try to find that information out or what might be there. It doesn't it is like but I also get that there are some people who just like don't and then they pay that. So they will be paying that amount that much money and more because you're paying by relying on somebody else's expertise. I already had expertise.
Yeah.
And I will say this, having my business and having released two products, having had the barrel aging, having done successful beer releases and collabs with folks, I would say within the last maybe couple of years, I've really owned my level of expertise. It took a while. I always thought maybe it was a fluke or I was coming around. I was like, oh, other people, I see what other people do. And I go, oh, that's so amazing. They do this and that. And I was like, and then I go, oh, and it takes people going, dude, do you know what you just did? Like, you just made this. You made a honey stick taste like a cocktail, which I always think, I love it when that blows people's minds when they taste those. Um,
It was really, um, when I stepped in for you to run your booth at Fog City Social,
Thank you, by the way. Thank you so much.
we had a blast. That was honestly like it was really rewarding, like that exact thing, like seeing people's minds be blown trying something. First, like explaining to them, like, there's a little bit of alcohol in it, but it's not like you're not getting like 14% in every single stick. Like this is meant to taste. It's that experience of being a kid and having a honey stick at a road stop, and it's like that sweetness, but it's for adults. It's like made to taste like a cocktail, and them kind of be like, all right, prove it, and then they're tasting it, and just like the delight spreading across their faces was
Yeah.
so rewarding to watch.
Yeah. That throws people off all the time. I think the one that always shocks them is like the chocolate martini because they're like,
I'm
no,
opening
you're
up that
getting
one
like,
now because that one is my favorite. I
and I
put
was
that
like,
I was telling it was so fun to tell people too, like, because it is like all of your products are incredibly versatile. They're not just like this is its one use and that's it.
yeah,
And it was so fun to like sit with the products for like a week before the event and play with them. Like, how could I use these? Like you, I do my research ahead of time because I don't want to, talk out of my ass and lie to people. Like, I want to, it's authentic. You
yeah,
want to speak from experience. So, like, putting Abby's chocolate martini in my coffee in the morning was such a treat. I loved it.
yeah. I and that was a dare.
Yeah.
It was a dare. But the honey sticks, the buzz sticks, and themselves came out of the pandemic. So I actually had to put the sauces on hold in 2019 because we were moving into 2020, and then the world fell apart, and I fell apart, and my coworkers fell apart in the course of like days. You find out, you got a staff of 13, and then you're down to four within 24 hours of a phone call.
Was that because, like, production had to come to a halt? Were they doing, like, skeleton crews to keep production up? Like, talk to me a little bit about that.
We had to, that was our tasting room staff. So
Mm,
production was
yeah.
literally just me and one other person. And then we had um our front of the house managers. That was it. There was just the four
Yeah.
of us. And everything had to shut down, but we were still producing alcohol, but we had to transition to making hand sanitizer, which also challenged
That's
me in a
right.
very creative way.
I forgot about that. Yeah, like,
Mm.
I mean, that's just, like, ingenuity and, like, the flexibility of, "Okay, how can we pivot? How can we pivot from here?"
Oh yeah, we were pivoting, and I'm not gonna lie, it was terrible. Um, but we all managed, and like, what are we going to do? Like, how are we going to rethink? How are we going to still stay afloat? How are we going to sell? That's when you remember when everybody's like, "Oh, we'll just do the boxes. People can buy stuff and come and pick up." I was because we were in Oregon at the time,
Yeah.
and we had the boxes, and they like, "Oh, OLCC was letting us like sell things online. People could pick up, we could deliver. Like they loosened their rules because you just had to. People were." going to be out of business. And so one of
Yeah.
the things that came out was I was like, people can't enjoy cocktails. And we're like, oh, and I was like, man, I would have honey sticks and have them, and it was just, it was so random. And I was like, I was like, that sounds like such a great idea. What do I call them? And at the time, a good friend of mine that I worked with, and he was like, we were all laughing. We were all been drinking as well. And he was like, Buzz, you should call them Buzz sticks. And I was like, I love that idea. And we're not going to spell them with a like sticks. We're going to spell them with an IX. And I legit went home, wrote up a contract. I paid him $300 to have that name and to have him sign it over. And I said, here's $300. Can I have the name? He goes, you don't have to pay me. I said, I know. I thank you for saying that. I said, I actually want to pay you. That's a great idea.
Hmm.
This is a great idea. I want to give you something. And I don't have a lot of money because I'm a small business. You knew this. I said, but I also want you to never like you don't. I don't want you to come back later.
Yep. Yep.
So
It's just being
that's what we're gonna
smart.
do. And then it started off with the bourbon lemonade and the honey lemon drop were the first two because those are both cocktails that I made at Freeland when I worked there. And so it's why I used their bourbon. That's why I still use their bourbon. Um, their gin doesn't exist anymore. But I've bought up all the bottles that I could in the state of Oregon, uh, and anywhere I can find them. And I know that honestly, I know that recipe because I made that gin for 3 years, so I do know it in my head. I can do a smaller version like of it if I need to recreate that particular gin. Um, so I'm sad that they don't have it anymore. But I also know that if I actually asked if they would make it, maybe they would. Maybe they'd be in a place where they could make it for me. I don't know. I'm not that big yet, but I would love it. But I still use it. And I still have more than enough bottles of like the Geneva gin to make this for the next couple of years at least.
Yeah. I mean, you're
Because it
you're
doesn't
also
take a
like
lot.
you're taking care of your people too. Like, you're
Yeah.
paying your friend for the name. You're with the buzz sticks, you're going back to like who you worked with
Yeah.
and you're using their barrels, their spirits.
Yeah, I've done that with all of I think the only two the only no, the only cocktail on the only buzz stick is the spiced honeybee. But that one was based off of the cocktail I made when I did the television show, Master Distiller.
Tell me about your
So
time on Master Distiller.
so are you familiar with the show?
Not really.
Okay. So Discovery, this starts off as a running joke when I would give tours. Um because I said that when I got my first distilling job, they asked what kind of experience I had, and I was like, well, technically, I have I work in a homebrew shop, so I learned how to I use also we got to use all sorts of equipment, and I said, but I also watch a lot of moonshiners, and I said, and I learned the most important thing is like cardio because you're running through the woods, which is always a great joke when you're a distiller giving a distillery tour that cardio is the most important thing in distilling, because of moonshiners, and that my first boss was like, you need to stop watching moonshiners right now is what he told me. And so I started watching moonshiners and I stopped, and then they had the show come out, and the concept is fascinating at the time. And at the time I knew there was another local woman distiller, and she was on the show and we were friends, and so she told me she did the show, and so I watched her episode and I was like, that was excellent. And so I was familiar with the idea. Is like, so they take either two pros and one moonshiner, or two moonshiners and one pro, and they put them through a test, and like they get the first test where they make their blanket, spirits, and then they do a distillation and the judges taste it, and then um they like eliminate somebody, and the last two go head to head, and the winner is crowned master distiller. It just so happened that canned cocktails Like I was like, well, what's the episode? And they were like canned cocktails, and I started to chuckle because at the time that's what I was making at Freeland. We were doing canned cocktails, so I was like, okay, I got a pretty good handle on what makes a good canned cocktail.
Yeah.
Having put two on the market,
What do you think
and
it is? What makes a good canned cocktail? Because they're like just blowing up still.
there are so many of them are bad. So many of them are bad, 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 so
Yeah.
bad. Um, it's hard to what people don't understand is that it's hard to use fresh.
Hmm.
Fresh does not translate well in a can with under uncertain circumstances. So
Sure.
once it leaves your distillery, you don't know if it's going to be sitting in a hot warehouse. You're going to know if it's going to be sitting in ambient temperatures for how long. You don't know if it's going to make it in immediately into a cold space. Um, so fresh fruit degrades quickly. People want to use fresh fruit because it sounds good to people who don't know.
Sure.
Like if you're, it's like, oh, no preservatives. Honestly, everything has preservatives and we need them. So the idea was like finding the balance between you can have things, but you're when people are looking for it, people think only of taste. People don't think of aroma and sensation. So where do the when you're like, oh, it's tastes like this, but it's like grapefruit has a very specific smell and it has a very particular oil taste, but it also has a bitter and sharpness that falls on a very particular place on the palate. So if you use artificial, but you still get those sensations, you can make something taste like something else. So it's really like it's just knowing how to kind of manipulate the senses. So fresh fruit is being a popular one, and people don't put a salt in things.
Oh,
Man,
yeah.
salinity matters. It salt will emphasize sweet. Salt will emphasize a lot of things, and a little bit goes a long
Oh,
way. But
yeah.
when you put nothing in, it leaves things flabby. So those are the two things: fresh
Okay.
fruit and salt. If
Sure.
you, so I did the show. Best time ever had. It was so much fun. And but I also was doing. I was playing with a cocktail that I had brought two different kinds of barrel aged honeys with me, and I was in my hotel room. Like mixing things up to try to get flavor profiles to take because I could take it to the set and we could use it. And I was like, this is what I'm going to use. This is I brought all the stuff that I didn't think they would have there. Um, what killed me was I didn't have enough carbonation. It was so hard to carbonate, quick carbonating, and I wanted a carbonated beverage. Someone else made a still beverage. We were all so good, and they were all delicious. And so after that, I was like, I love this cocktail. I think I want this to
Yeah.
be around. And so the spiced honeybee is a version of that, which is a version of like a tropical rum drink. So it's
Mm.
like it's rum with spices and lemon juice, and imagine that, as in a coconut. Like that's
Yeah.
kind of where I was thinking. That's the only one that doesn't use a name brand rum because I don't like to use. So I got permission from both distilleries to use their name in the ingredients because I wanted people to know, especially when I was selling around here, that if you want to taste what this tastes like in its natural form, these are the distilleries. This is their product. I highly recommend that you get it. And I've always said that I was like, Freeland is here. You can go get their bourbon. It's delicious. Same thing with like New Deal. But I've always asked their permission. They've always been truly kind to me. I give them options for selling them there in their distillery and their distillery stores if they like it. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they've been so kind. So the rum end of it eventually will be me making it. Um, so right now it's just a nondescript rum, but eventually I wanted to get to the point where I was like, I wanted to have my own distillery, and I want to do I want to be able to make the spirits that go into all these really cool stuff. So we'll see.
Okay.
Everything
That's a goal that you have now that just yeah.
It was, and then every year I get older and more things hurt, and I don't know.
Yeah.
So, to be really frank, I finally found what I wanted to do, and it was so late in life. But also I go, I've had my company for 8 years and I'm getting more and more traction with it because I was just doing it part-time because I loved my jobs. I'm now full-time doing it and I'm still like it feels like I'm still in the early stages because I'm doing it full time. Um, but if I don't think I would have made it where I am now with all of these products if I had started sooner because it was all the things that I learned over the years that made going from an idea to a finished product happening in less than like 6 months possible. I'm learning how to taste, learning how to make stuff, learning how to write recipes, learning how to navigate institutions when you're trying to do licensing, like all of that stuff. Um, yeah, I don't think I would have been as far.
Through this journey of creation, but also entrepreneurship, um, what were like the biggest challenges that arose for you that you can speak to?
The biggest challenge is for me has always been I love creating and I hate administrative work. So my biggest challenge was and still is I don't want to say was is running the business. I you having to learn all of these aspects. Not and I always tell and this is why I actually have told people I said you don't need to learn everything so that you can do it all yourself. You need to know everything so you know when someone is doing it wrong when you hire them.
Mhm.
So that you know enough about how to do your books so that when somebody hands you something, you go, "That doesn't look right." Like,
Yeah.
you know enough that people can't walk all over you and take advantage of you. I said, so if that means that I do my own P&Ls, I do my own stuff, I did my own production, I took advice from other people. I did have a co-packer for a time, but I was there watching and doing, and then I was making. And her biggest advice was, she goes, "You should spend year at least making your own product so that you know in the future what people are doing and what is wrong, and what you can tell them." And that's best advice I can give people. Also, it's like, except for things like graphic design, because I'm not an artist. Um, but also finding people that you can trust, finding people that embody your vision, but can take constructive criticism. But also, that's the onus is on me to kind of be able to verbalize it better. So
Of course.
learning everything about your business that you can kind of talk to people like. I hate doing it. I hate doing all of that stuff. Um, but I have to know how to do it. It doesn't make me comfortable. I would much rather be in the lab. I'd much rather be looking through barrels. I'd much rather be doing anything else but paperwork and computer stuff. And I do that so much. Um, and so I tell people, like, know it, but then hire out when you can.
Oh,
And then
delegate.
stop.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And like also don't micromanage. That would be the other thing.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's like you have to have faith that you found the right person.
Yeah. I so I'm so obsessed with the creative process, but it's not just I think it's just any process I'm so interested in. And I think a lot of that too is the late in life realization that I have
Oh,
ADHD, and it's
oh,
coming up with
same.
coming up with the process and like the foundation for like, color blocking my schedule, and like that is very it is calming to me being able to, this day I'm doing this day I'm doing that. Everything is clean and organized, and I feel like
You
I've
should try that.
sorry?
I should try that.
Color blocking?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not going to show you. I have butcher paper all over the walls in my living room. Um, and I write everything out as sometimes I'll walk by and I'll be like, "Oh, don't forget you have to do this," or "This is what this looks like." And so things sit like butcher paper, like,
Oh,
"Oh, this is
this
what I
is
need." So I
this is what this is what I wanna get into, like, the little intricacies of, like, what tools are you using to make, like, to almost like game your brain into being productive, but allowing yourself, because I think like when I first started out with my business, I set aside, and I'm right there with you too. Like I wanted to be able to. It's like I don't want to do the admin work, you know. I'm just here to do the creative work, but like it comes with it. Like you have to know how to do it before you can delegate it out. So originally it was, you know, my Mondays were set for admin work. Tuesday was this client. Wednesday was kind of split work. That was my networking day, and that was a day
Oh,
where I was taking calls. If I had like project-based clients versus like a retainer client, I would like chip away at those projects. So I had like a weekly rotation of what it looked like. And if I don't have that, um, especially being an entrepreneur, like keeping a record of like what I'm actually working on day in, day out. So I don't get so swept up in the minutia. It's like, oh, I was like doing
oh my
billing, or
God.
I was just like so tunnel vision working on like a logo for somebody, but being able to take stock at
Oh,
the end of the
oh my
day to
God.
know like what the hell did I actually do? I know I did things, but am I chipping away at a goal here? So tell me a little bit like what's that balance look like for you? Because
Oh my
to me,
gosh.
I'm like, I just want to do the creative work. That's the fun stuff. But it's like, no, there's also the other
You gotta do
stuff
other
that
stuff.
isn't fun. So like, what's your balance look like?
Oh my gosh. You just made me laugh so much with that inside because I spent a whole day writing a spreadsheet program that allows me to input my change in recipe proportions depending on the size batches and puts it and automatically populates it to my production sheet that prints out, which means I had to find the programs to write things like changing the date that I start, make changing it into a Julian date, which then changes it into the batch code when it goes. Like I spent a whole day doing that.
Yeah.
Unnecessary because before then, I was just copying and pasting and putting it from one to the other, and it was fine. But then I decided because I didn't want, what did I did not want to do? Oh, I didn't want to address some emails. I decided, oh, this would be a better use of my time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, so I was recently diagnosed with, well, we just recently acknowledged the elephant in the room, the big elephant that's dancing, is that I have ADHD. I
Yeah.
always knew this. You know, when I was younger, we used to call it type A personality. Um, you're just like, you're just driven in type A and you're all over the place. And I was
And
like,
but also hearing too, like you read a lot as a kid, and so did I. And it was just, and now I'm reading way more. I got a Kindle last year. I'm keeping track, like when did I start this? When did I end it? How many pages was it? You know, just so I'm keeping a tally. But it's just like the constant need to like just consume and just like
oh,
that
yeah.
attention span. But yeah,
But
how
I
has that
was,
affected? Yeah,
my doctor, um, so I take medication for it. So most people take medication for their ADHD every single day. Like they're like, I take my one pill every day and I'm able. I learned that I can't do that because it doesn't work. I learned this when I was working, actively working at the distillery, was that when I took my medication, everything took me longer because I couldn't, it took me longer to transition and pivot because I could not focus on 5 or 6 different things going on around me. I could only focus on one
sure.
thing, which is
Yeah,
not helpful when you're working and you're running a still from one thing, you're possibly running 2 stills and trying to do fill orders, prep for something else. Like when you're doing we have 4 or 5 different things to get done. You can't focus all of your time on just one thing because to drown out everything else. So I realized that I only would take them on. So I plan my days where I take my medication and I do them 3 days on, 2 days off, 3 days on, and I plan my work week around that. So the 3 days that I'm on usually fall on days when I know I have meetings, I'm doing paperwork, or I'm going to be at a market.
yeah,
Off days were days when I was like, I'm going to be making sauces in the kitchen. I've got to do packaging and, you know, and other stuff in the kitchen. Other things happen and that happens and it's like no big deal. Um, so I actually that's how I would break up my days. Um, and so I only need it for the things that I need to concentrate on, which is actually works really well for me when I'm not having to I feel safer that way because I
Sure.
hated not being able to focus and not being able to be like, you know, is that water running? Something, like if you're in there, you're like, is
Yeah.
was the water running? Like, and not being able to go think and go, water's running from here. What are the three things that you need to be able to do when I'm not taking my medication and heavily focused? I can go, hey, these are all the possibilities. I can run through those possibilities just like that. Um, I found that medication slows me down
Mm.
in a way that is good for me when I have to sit at a computer. Um, so spread and when I'm going to procrastinate and write spreadsheets for like the whole day.
I typically find like, I have to hack my brain, and I have to like, it's like a real knowing of yourself and when you're productive and when
Hmm.
your brain is at its most creative. I like working at night because for years I was doing freelance work in addition to my full-time job. So I found the only time to get that done would be after my full-time job got out at 5 or 6 o'clock or 7, depending when it was. I would then like work until midnight doing other graphic design stuff. So
Yeah.
it'd be like split time. I'm sitting in front of the TV, I'm watching something, but I'm also designing because like my
Yeah.
brain does work that way. I can have something on TV and focus on design work. If
Oh
it's
yeah.
copywriting, I can't do that. I also know like when I need to turn it off for the night because if I slam my computer shut and then immediately go to bed, I'm not going to fall asleep for another 2 hours because it's still thinking. So I need to have like a runtime, like a downtime of like,
Yep.
or like, an off ramp for when, the brain needs to settle down and transition from here to there. But I think like, recognizing, you know, what are the strengths that I
Yeah.
have? Like, how can I, with the way that everybody's brain is different. And like, that was such a lesson early on, especially when I was managing other creatives and working with other people. It's, you know how to do it, but you need to trust the other person that like they will work on a schedule that acclimates to the way that their brain
Absolutely.
works, acclimates to whatever their lifestyle, if they're a mother with children, whatever that is, like you're an adult, I trust you here, and I trust that your working patterns better than I would.
Absolutely. And I love that people like the hard stops for me have always been I will if you my phone is always on. I
Mm,
had to actually start putting it on do not disturb at night,
mhm,
because I never would stop working. If my
mhm,
phone went off on a notification at 2 o'clock in the morning, I would wake up and get locked into a text conversation because um, a coworker, a co-friend of a fellow board member, because I manage a commercial kitchen now too. Um, Gets this idea and she's awake because she holds weird hours too, but she'll just send texts. And then I would wake up and we would be going back and forth. The next thing you know, it's an hour and we're like, dude, we gotta go to sleep. I gotta go to sleep.
yeah,
So I had to start being like, all right, send it. I'm not seeing anything until 7 a.m. Like, mind you, I will have already been up, but I don't respond to any kind of like text until a reasonable hour for folks. But
yeah,
that's just kind of my process. My other really fun process thing that I love to do is that I like to write. Write everything down. I draw a lot of stuff.
mm,
Um, so I on paper. So I have a notebook. Every recipe idea, every iteration of it goes into, and I've had my notebook since I started homebrewing. So I have every notebook with all my old homebrew recipes in them. Everything that's ever had a recipe thing is all on paper.
mm,
Um, and it'll all be on paper, dated and all that kind of all my notes and stuff are all there. So before it ever goes onto my computer. So I'll do everything by hand before I put anything typed up on my computer. Um, I have like a tablet that I write things to that is all handwritten that I'll print and then put in a notebook or something. But it's still everything is done by hand. So for me, that's how I remember best,
yeah,
because it becomes a visceral. When you type, things are less visceral, and so
yes,
for me, I want to write out like I'll design my label idea, or I'll have write out sayings, or I'll put all these other things in because putting them by hand gives me like a body memory of some sort, so I
Of
can
course. Yeah.
recollect them a little bit easier. But that's how all of those things started, like taking recipe stuff away, taking, flavors, all my ideas, all of that stuff all gets written out. I'm trying to think of what other fun process stuff that I do besides writing on walls. I love writing on walls. Um,
I did too, and then I was chastised. Though
I
I
know,
was
which is
get
why I
I
started
was
putting
like,
paper up.
yeah, I was chastised, but then I was given like, here's a sketchbook and here are markers versus like, okay, maybe not this. We rent. Don't want to lose our security deposit. Here's some sketchbooks and some paper and pencil. Like you can sketch, you can draw, just not on the
Yeah,
walls. Like understand. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, we go. So now I just staple butcher paper to our walls in our living room, and I put big ideas there. Um, it's also funny because then my husband can also see as he walks through, he gradually sees things being like, "Oh, you gonna do mustard?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh," because he'll see something written there that says mustard jars and like labels and all this kind of stuff written out. And be like, "Oh, mustard,"
It's
or
basically
he'll show
like
like,
a literal insight to your brain and what you're working on. So it's like
yeah. So it's there's that, and then there's like he's like this year's been running pretty good because I actually have like my estimated sales forecasted and what I'll need and where we actually hit at the end of the month. And he goes, "Hey," so it's for ways for me to when I get down and I go, I think I'm failing. I have a it helps me. It's like a dragon with their jewels around them. It helps me feel secure because I look up and I go, "Oh, I actually did way better than I did better than I forecasted. I was close, and it was like, oh, for the year, I am well ahead of what I was last year at the same time period." So like seeing those gains all around me where I don't have to go digging for them um, is kind of a boost because it's hard to measure success. Um, that's been the hardest thing is we measure success through sales, through revenue, through whether or not we how much we have to pay in taxes. And I've had to stop looking at that as the only way to measure the success.
absolutely. Tell me more about what your definition of success is then. Because obviously, like sales is a big part of it because you are creating
Sales is a
products for
huge part of
people
it.
to buy.
I've been measuring it in the ways that I've been impacting people. And I say this in the sense that I actually was somewhere and this woman comes running. Oh, I was up at a farmer's market. And I usually do this farmer's market every 2 weeks, every other week. But I had missed a week, so I was not there. Um, and this woman comes running and she goes, "Oh my God, you're here." And she bought like 2 bottles of ketchup. She goes, "This is the only ketchup my son eats." And she's like, "We are almost out." And I don't know. She goes, "I don't know what I was going to do."
Yeah.
And so she's like, and so there's this moments or someone goes, "Your name came up." When someone tells me my name comes up, I go, "What context?
Mhm.
Is
Yeah.
it beverage? Is it beverage or is it food?" And so,
Or did I say something to offend you?
I mean,
Maybe.
that's always a given too. Uh, because yeah, I think I'm funny. Not everybody does. So when like my name came up, or someone said we wanted to do this project, and that you were the person to talk to. Um, so I remember, I think it was a question somebody had asked me about, like, oh, have you won any awards? And I think I'm like, in my entire professional career, I have made products that have won awards for other people. And I think I've only won an award once based off of a product that was utilizing my honey in it and my barrel. And that was a co-prop that was like that we submitted it and it won. And that's in my entire professional career. I've made things for other people. I've designed things for other people that have gone on to win awards and medals. Um, but I think in my entire career, this is the first time that I have won something. And I thought that's weird, but yet people know who I am.
Mm.
And so I've been trying to kind of go, is it best to be known? That's a marker of success. Like I'm making it that people want to talk to me. People want to learn from me. They want to know what's going on, or taste this, and can you fix, what do you want, what are you tasting, what are you smelling? um I get that a lot when people hand me things. uh, I have an intense tasting face, I've been told.
Can you show me your tasting face?
I will show you my tasting face. It's a
Yeah.
funny thing because so
Should we
people
taste the
give me
ketchup
things.
now?
I'll taste the ketchup. I was just getting
Yeah.
ready to grab the ketchup to taste. So I'm almost always going to do a smell. So I do a lot of smelling, and when I'm always like, and I will always hold my eyes closed, and I'm thinking, and I'm smelling, and because I'm trying to like shut everybody else out. And I always give it a few minutes of breathing and rolling things around, and I'm always just thinking and blinking, and you're always like, I have very like intense like frowning face. And I tell people all the time, I was like, when people give me something to taste as a maker, I know how hard people work. I'm not going to just shove something in my mouth and tell them what's good. I'm going to put it in and be deliberate and tell them what I'm tasting, how it feels in my mouth, where it's hitting, whether or not I'm getting like, I want to let them know that I respect the time and the craft and what went into making this, because there's a lot of thought that went into making a product. And that is how I show my respect and appreciation for their efforts, by taking the time to taste it to its fullest extent and to ask them questions about it. What were you wanting with this? That makes me feel good when people do that for me, and I know that it feels good when I do that. You can see it in people's faces. So when people say my tasting face is like, there's like, usually if I'm in a crowd with people and they're like, she's tasting, and it's like people see my face and they're like, everybody gets quiet because they're like, what's gonna come out of her mouth? And I genuinely been like, okay, here's what I'm getting. This and this, and there's that moment where everybody's like, whoa. So then everybody's like, let me taste this and see what they're, and I want people to be like, and I just be like, that is, thank you. Thank you for giving me this experience. That was amazing sensation. What else, like that kind of interaction. And so I like to talk about that when that's what I want people to like, what I want people to taste, what I think I want to taste. So that's
I
the
I love that so much because I mean, you can look at it from, a capitalist perspective, which is, you're making a product and this will be sold and you make money off of, the labor and the product that you're selling. But really it's human connection. You're creating
oh
something where, we are able to understand all the different senses that we're experiencing when trying something. So you're rolling it around in your mouth, you're breathing, you're smelling. So it's like multi-sense experience going into creating, food is a necessity. And I think about, you don't like to cook, you like to, just you eat because you have to, you cook because you have to, but like you're creating things that will make people stop and taste and really consider. And it's like, food as pleasure in that way,
yeah,
not just out of
which seems
necessity.
completely counter to the what I do when what I do at home, which is I just can't. I think it's because I have too many things going on in my head that I can't take the time to really do that one, slow down enough to do that one step, and it's really a bother for me. And I just need to fuel this body. And I don't always need to enjoy it, but I do need to be like, all right, we gotta get it done. Um,
Yeah.
and so I'm like, yes, which at the same time, I don't want people to do that with my products at home. I want them to be able to enjoy them. I enjoy them, but I also don't like to cook.
Because you're talking a little bit about, what boundaries of when you're stopping work for the day, understanding, when your brain works best. You're an entrepreneur, so, naturally you're thinking about your work and your business all the time. I mean, your walls are literally covered in butcher paper with like all the things that you're thinking about, which is great for like, your husband can see what you're thinking about, how you're doing, financially, for like, communication on that end. But I wonder, like, is there a balance there? Like, do you have a clear line of separation between who you are as a person versus what you do for a profession?
No.
And how important is that for, I have opinions on that for you because I feel like so much of, having that experience of doing the tasting for you at Fog City Social, I was coming at it from like a marketing perspective. Like, here are ways, like, this is why it's great. Here's how you can use it. Here's the price point. And it was receptive because you're looking to sell those products there. But I think a lot of it is, so much of it is your story. And it's not just simply, I had an idea for something and then I went to an incubator and they made it. It's your background, it's your education, it's your professional experience in breweries, distilleries, it's the relationships that you have with apiaries and other distillers. So I feel like so much of your profession and your brand is a reflection of your interests and you.
Yeah. It's it is. It was one of the reasons why I don't have a personal Instagram account. I didn't have any of my handles, like when I had Twitter, I didn't I, Twitter, TikTok, I have no personal accounts. They're all the business accounts. Because and it doesn't matter because so much of what I do every day is relatable to what's going on with my business or the businesses that I'm involved with and my collaborations with folks. I'm never not thinking about, you know, I'm never not thinking about my business. I work in a brewery part-time. I I drink, I taste constantly, not drink constantly, but I tasting things constantly. So I'm
Yeah.
out, I'm social. I'm always everything I do is within that context of um tasting and honey and like evaluating. And so everything I'm doing has plays into that. I think that it's really I've kind of given up having a me kind of thing, which is
Mhm.
not no, that's not true. I have it, it's just so it's so small, it's so like narrow. Like for some things that people don't know about me is that um I love stand up. So on occasion, I have over the years dabbled in stand up and I am not good, but I tell amazing stories. So I do mostly
Yeah.
monologuing and storytelling. So any shows that I've done have all been like shows that are geared towards that. But I love to make people laugh. I love to tell jokes. And so some of the things I do is like but I hate improv. Let's be really clear. I don't like improv. Um,
I love
uh,
improv.
ugh,
And
ugh.
it's so funny because on other episodes of this, I talk a lot about the improv principle of yes and, of just like as a way for like I'm recognizing your
Yes,
truth and your reality. And it's, so are you like a no? Nope, I'm just a no.
I'm just a no. Keep it moving. No, keep it moving. I have not found it, and I've done it several times, and I cringe when I have to do it. When I've like, so I was like, my next big thing is like, I really wanted to take a formal as a stand up comedy class. A friend of mine did it. He's funny. I think it was funny before he took the stand up, but I think he made him better class. And so I totally was like, maybe I should do this because I really enjoy it. I really enjoy telling stories. I also found that since starting this business, um, I'm already pretty friendly as a person, but I love talking. Um, I don't necessarily need to have another body there. It's real helpful. So being on stage and having like you're like you paid to be here, haha. I can say you're like captive audience. I don't care. So that's probably the only thing I do. That and knitting I do when I get a chance to. Those are the things that I do that are not for public kind of consumption. But everything else about my life has all been about dedicated pretty much to my business. So when people see if you watch my Instagrams, the reels, and all those things, that's as pretty up to date as what's going on in my life right then and there. And so when people walk up to me and like they feel like they interact with me like they know me, probably because if you follow me enough, you do. I'm pretty much like that all the time.
Yeah,
So, yeah, it's a I don't I don't know if this brand I I built this brand and it's so much of what happens in it is based off of me and my expertise. Like I think we have had this conversation. It was like it's what makes it so unique. It's what makes it hard. It's what would make this hard to sell as a company if I was going
sure.
to, because you can't do what I do. Like it's all the ways that these things work together in my brain that make this so great and unique and not repeatable, um, by anybody else, which is how I always position, um, when I talk about my brand as opposed to other people who might have a honey product that they do once in a while that sits in a barrel, like, oh, we have a barrel aged. I'm like, yeah, that's great. That's delicious. You have one honey, one barrel, you do it and you do enough and keep it 6 months out of the year. Or, I love it because I think Makers or one of the other big distilleries was like, we have a barrel aged honey thing. And what they show is that they just put honey in a barrel and they destroyed the barrel opening it after they got all the honey out, like because they had to take the head off of it and they do. And I was like, oh, that's so much, like you can't reuse that. But they're also a huge distillery that doesn't, and they don't need to, and so they have more barrels than they could shake a stick at. So um, their next sustainability doesn't matter to them in that sense. And so I'm like, okay, I talk about it in terms of like the life of this barrel afterwards. So there's all these things that set me apart that I have to make sure that I emphasize. At the same time, I acknowledge that other people are doing these things and why people keep coming back to me. You're coming back to me every year because every year I got something new and different and amazing. Um, but you could buy this once from them, and I guarantee you'll never buy it again.
Sure. More of a novelty versus like a true understanding of like
Yes.
how integral like every element of the process, every element that is used to create these products, the lifespan,
Yeah.
understanding,
But
it's
like,
it's just like it's your experience and like that's the key differentiator.
yeah, I'm like, I can tell you where that barrel went, what beer went into that, or if this barrel went back to the winery, like what they did with it, and then I've tasted this product that happened after, and like all these things that happen. Um, I think that that's for me. Um, my relationships make it so that it's like I like the sustainability aspect of it, but I also like the fact that it creates these lasting connections that make people want to continue to work with me. I think because people want to know where their food comes from, they want to know all the things that they know. The more you know, um, that's not on like marketing materials, that like I know the name of my beekeepers and I know the names of the apiaries, and I know what crops they're like going to be growing, so I go down there at these specific times because I know I want to taste honey that's from these, like that kind of knowledge, and being able to share that with other people. um, that's like people appreciate it. They want to know those things. And sometimes they get it and they didn't know they wanted to know and they were gonna walk away from me, but then like, oh, that was interesting. And so then we continue talking a little bit longer. And then it's like, okay, where's the importance then? Where are we going to find um where we have this we meet, we're gonna continue to have this conversation about
Yeah.
it. Um,
Do you find that's a very Portland audience, a very Oregon audience, or
it's a
are
very
you finding
Oregon
like yeah,
It's a very Oregon thing. Portland is filled with transplants. So it's when I say Portlanders, I have to remember it's mostly transplants now. But it's the transplants people who've come here where it's important for them to know so many. Like they want to buy super local. They don't unless they have to. They won't go to big stores. Um, they want to buy at their corner market if you can get something that's there's locals. So that isn't a Portland thing, but it's also very much an Oregon thing, where that's kind of the value of buying from your neighbors.
But that thoroughness that you like clearly like it's like a value is just, there's the curiosity, but it's also the thoroughness. And the thoroughness comes through research, it comes through experimentation, it comes through, thinking through all the different ways that it could go wrong and your all the different scenarios. It just seems um just it's refreshing, and it's also just seems like so unique to how you approach your life and the products that you create. And I feel like, you when thinking about like, you're infusing food with you didn't specifically mention like you're infusing it with intention. You talked about if you're in a bad mood, like that'll get infused through the food. But I feel, with these products, you do taste just like the amount of like passion and dedication and intention that comes through with that.
I think that you people do taste it when they taste something, and
Yeah.
it doesn't give them, and it gives them multiple feelings, multiple layers. When I say that this tastes different with different types of meats and proteins and oils, people were like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's made so that these are so layered because I want them to be that way. And that's why I'm like taking my time with doing all this certain things. And this is why I picked this because, there's always the intention of why did you pick something?" I never think of it that way. I just think of it as the fact that I can't be happy unless I've actually made sure that every possible question has been answered in my mind about something. And it's as done as it's ever going to be. Like I probably once I finished the ketchup and the barbecue sauce, I've not tinkered with the recipe. I've never made any changes to it. It's fine. Um, the recipe itself. When I'm doing my batches, because I'm working with fresh stuff, fresh spices, different lots, then that's where tinkering happens on the fly. But the base recipe itself doesn't change.
Let's talk about something that you wish more people understood about what it actually takes to create something that resonates with an audience.
Okay. My suggestion for people with someone would be open to it not being the way you would make it at home.
Mm,
Because that's going to depend on where you want it to go. I have talked with a lot of people, like, what folks don't know is that when I first started making this, everything was fresh. Tomatoes, the garlic, the onions, all that stuff was cooked, roasted and prepped and all that. It was all made with fresh ingredients. Tasted fantastic. Production-wise, nightmare.
sure.
So I ended up having to like that was the decision. Do we continue to make it with fresh or ingredients that I can purchase from the stores, from farmers, which would allow me to, get to apply for a good food award. I don't have an and I was like, I'm still salty about that. Sorry. Whoa, that
Wait,
came
with the
through. It's been a
good
couple of
award?
years. Woo, I didn't
What
realize
what was
that
that?
still stung. Um, that was a memory of like I knew I I used dry. I had to go. I used dry spices,
Sure.
and because dry and powdered spices, there was just no getting around that. Shelf stability wise, process wise, I shaved 5 hours off of a production day because I wasn't having to do or making it 2 days because I was making stuff the day before. It didn't make sense. I couldn't keep up. Um, so being open to when they said maybe you should try it with dried powdered stuff, which it's not local. Like most of the stuff isn't local. You're buying it, so it's like it's hard. It's so that's where the good food is because it's not local. Like there's very little of it that comes in. So
Gotcha.
I'm never going to be eligible. It
Sure.
makes me a little sad because I love that. I love that organization and fan.
Yeah.
I totally believe in it.
Because
So
when I
here's
think
that.
about the products that you've made, like, the locality of it is such a
The
central
buzz sticks are
part.
the
It's like you're
closest ones.
it really is like you're working with local distillers, you're partnering with local apiaries, you're using like the spirits, the barrels, the bees that are all hyper local. It's like that is as
Yeah.
local as you could get. It's like sure you're using, powdered black pepper or garlic or using
Yeah.
those things, but it's like you're looking at like the overall message and intention, and that should be enough.
It's not, and I understand why. And I was like, but here's the thing: I never owned the buzz sticks in a way that I previously that I do now. So it's a very different. If I applied now, it would only be with the sticks
Sure.
because everything is hyper local. My second thing I would tell people is chemicals aren't bad.
Ooh,
Yeah,
tell me more.
I depending on where people want their foods to go to or where they want like their product to be. Um, there are certain things that you can add to sustain to give you longevity to aid in preservation to make it so that you and they're not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's like that's where the question of you asking the right kinds of questions. What is this base made out of? Is it derived from this? What is this process? And asking the questions instead of just wholesale saying, I don't want to use any preservatives. I don't want to use any chemicals. I was like, okay,
That's more like marketing at that point. It's like, what are some selling points? Like, no preservatives. Like, oh, that must be good for me. But understanding, like, well, this is why we use preservatives in some foods,
yeah, that was it. That was why. They're like, oh, so if you're gonna do this, um, that's that just that understanding of being open to letting science work its magic and knowing when like what your level is. But you have to know what all your options are. And a lot of people don't didn't don't want to hear those options because they're afraid of what the optics look like on the marketing end of it. So understanding what all the options are if you're going to go the science route with like having other going to expecting somebody else's expertise. If you're going to do everything yourself, be open to when you take that product in for the science folks to look at it. You should be prepared to either defend why you chose this and be either willing to give yourself wiggle room or say, I'm not going to change this. We'll figure out a way to work around it and stand firm in that. But you have to know why. And you have to know. So I believe in every single ingredient. That's why it's there. That's why it's there in this particular way. This is why I do a particular process and nothing else. These things. And I stand firm on all that and I make no changes. And if someone said we could try it this way, and I said, I've tried it that way, I don't like it. I don't like what it does. And I can tell you why. Like that's doing my due diligence, but also being able to defend and stand firm. Those are the two things I would tell people if you're doing a food product, because I'm like, convince me. Like, I'm the person that's going to have to be convinced that this is going to be good because then I can convince other people as to why we've chosen this.
Lee's journey from procrastinating grad student to honey alchemist proves that the most authentic paths often lead to the most meaningful work. Her willingness to trust curiosity over convention and design her business around who she actually is, that's exactly the kind of creative processing this show is all about. If Lee's story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear that their weird process might be their advantage. You can find Lee and The Barreled Bee at thebarreledbee.com and on Instagram at thebarreledbee. You can find me on Instagram at creativesprocessing, or you can email me at creativesprocessing@wordofmouthcreative.co. And I would absolutely love it if you could rate the show and leave a comment. Thanks for listening. Till next time, stay human, stay curious.